How's it going, my bakers? I hope you're having a great day. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're making seeded Spelt sandwich rolls. So let's go to the kitchen, check them out. This recipe was inspired by my 100% hydration whole wheat no-knead bread. Now that was a mouthful. Try saying that 5 times in a row quickly. A few people have been asking for spelt flour recipes, so I decided to use the method from the other recipe and change the flour to whole grain spelt, and instead of dividing into separate loaves, before baking I scored the dough to create individual, easy to tear off sandwich rolls. I sprinkled a thick coating of seeds on top, and the result is a delicious bread with a crunchy top, soft interior, and plenty of nutritional value. So let's get right to it and see what we need to make it. We will of course need some whole grain spelt flour, yeast, salt, water, and plenty of seeds. I decided to go with black and white sesame seeds, but you could use any seeds you like, or you can leave the top plain. It's totally up to you. We'll also need some olive oil for this recipe. Half of it will be folded into the dough during bulk fermentation. The other half will be poured in a tray before final fermentation. It will ensure that we get a nice crispy bottom. As for the equipment, we'll need a tray with some non-stick paper, another tray for fermenting, but you could use a bowl instead if you don't have 2 trays. I like to use this because it has a flat bottom. We'll also need a bowl for mixing, scales, a dough scraper, and a temperature probe. It's the middle of summer in London right now, so my kitchen is pretty hot. 30 degrees Celsius, that's 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And that is the only reason why I'm using cold water for this recipe. Normally for a no-knead dough, I would use room temperature water, but it's way too hot right now. If I would use room temperature water, the dough would ferment too quickly and might overproof. And if you are new to temperature control, check out the Principles of Baking playlist. You can learn all about it there. Right, back to our dough. In a large bowl, combine the water, yeast and the salt and mix well. You want to dissolve the salt completely. This is our only chance to dissolve the salt because we're not kneading this dough. Now add the flour and mix until there's no more dry flour left, and then continue mixing for another 30 seconds. We want to get a little bit of gluten going here. And yes, I still call this a no-knead dough. If it doesn't leave the bowl, and if you don't work it with your hands, it's a no-knead dough. But I know a lot of people will disagree, and that's fine, call it what you want. Now grab your tray, or bowl if you're using one, pour in half of the oil, and then pour the dough onto the oil. Now let's take the temperature just to see where we're at. 18 degrees would be a little bit cool in normal circumstances, but my kitchen is so hot that this dough will warm up in no time. Right, now we can start the bulk fermentation process. Cover your dough and leave it to ferment for 20 minutes. After the first 20 minutes fermentation, we'll perform a bowl fold. Wet your hand with water so it doesn't stick. Then grab a piece of dough and fold it over the middle. Then go around in a circle a couple times until the dough feels nice and tight. This first fold is mostly there to fold in most of the oil and also to transform this pile of dough into a nice dough ball. After this, we'll be performing coil folds. And I'll explain those in a second. Once you get your dough to a stage where it's nice and tight, you can pick it up and push it down and up into itself. This is another way of tightening your dough ball. Rub some oil on top of it so the cling film doesn't stick. Then cover it up and leave it to ferment for another 20 minutes. After the next 20 minutes fermentation, we'll start performing coil folds. And again, wet your hands with water so they don't stick. Gently pick the dough up by the middle, releasing the front of it from the tray, and then roll it underneath itself. Repeat this coil fold a couple times, then turn the tray, then perform it on the opposite side, and repeat this step on all 4 sides. Next up, I decided to take the dough and wipe the tray with it to pick up all the oil. I want to get as much of it in the dough as possible. And now we can finish with the same move that we did after the first fold. Pick the dough up, fold the sides down and then up into the middle. Just don't tighten it too much, otherwise it may tear. Okay, now we can cover it up, leave it to ferment for another 20 minutes and then perform another coil fold. All this folding is there for gluten development. If we didn't fold this dough, it would just end up being a bowl of porridge. And if we're not kneading it, we must do something. But some people actually say that a dough that is folded is not even a no-knead dough. But by that logic, the only no-knead bread you can get is from the shop, because you don't have to touch it at all. Okay, so another coil fold done, another 20 minutes, and now we're performing the final coil fold. It's important to note that every subsequent fold should be performed more gently than the previous one. As the dough is fermenting, it's filling up with gas, and we don't want to knock that gas out, so be more and more careful with every fold. Okay, so we performed 1 bowl fold, and then 3 coil folds, and we have built up some good gluten strength. Now we'll cover this up and leave it to ferment for around 40 minutes. We will have to stretch this dough out very thin, so the gluten needs at least 40 minutes to relax enough for us to be able to do so. I guess we could call this the final shaping step. Right, quickly about the size of my tray. It is 39 by 25 centimeters, or 15 inches by 10 inches. If your tray is smaller, your bread will be thicker. I've rubbed the tray with a little bit of oil so the paper doesn't move around. Now I'm pouring in the other half of the oil of the recipe. It will make it a lot easier to stretch this dough out, and the loaf will get a nice crispy bottom because of it, and of course it will prevent it from sticking too. Okay, so to transfer the dough from one tray to the next, rub your hands with oil, then gently release the dough from the tray. Then move it over. It will be stretchy, it might get distorted, but totally fine. And now all you need to do is stretch it out to fit the tray. Do it gradually, don't rush it, you don't want to tear a hole in this dough. If your hands stick too much, you can cover them with some more oil. Once the dough is nicely stretched and fills up the tray, cover it up and leave it for the final proof, which should take around 1 hour. During the final hour of fermentation, preheat your oven, 250 degrees Celsius, fan off, and that is 480 Fahrenheit. If you have a pizza steel or a pizza stone, use that as a base to bake on. This is especially useful for me, because my oven doesn't have a heating element on the bottom. Right, once your dough is puffed up nicely, we can proceed to the next step, covering it with seeds. As I mentioned earlier, you can use any seeds you like, but I must say these sesame seeds worked out really well. They created an extra crispy coating on top. Sprinkle them nice and evenly, you don't want seeds on seeds, because they'll just fall off. And to really make them stick, use the palm of your hand and gently press them in. This will also ensure that the surface of the loaf is nice and level. Right, there's just one more thing to do before baking. Divide this dough into individual rolls, and you can do as many as you like. I divided this into 8, which made for quite large rolls. 10 might be a good number and a good size. I wouldn't make them any bigger though. Make sure you cut right down to the paper, and finish off by tidying up the edges as well. Okay, let's get this bad boy in the oven. It will not take long at all at this temperature, around 13 minutes will do it. It's like baking a pizza. The bread is so thin that if you bake it for a long time it will dry out. So a high temperature quick bake is the best way to do it. Once your loaf is golden brown all over and the seeds are nicely toasted, it's ready. Take it out of the tray and remove the paper, leave it to cool down. Ideally you want to leave it on a rack. If you place it on a solid surface, the bottom will sweat, it'll get soggy. If you're into baking, you should definitely own one of these, or improvise. Right, here we are, a 100% whole grain spelt, no-knead sandwich bread. Something a little bit unique, a little bit different. I was very happy with the result. And if you're looking for something new to try, this might just be it. Because of the high crust to crumb ratio, they will not stay soft for very long. Ideally you will eat them on the same day or on the next day. But as you can see, they are pretty nice and soft. And that's of course mostly because of the high hydration. I will definitely play around with this recipe a little bit more. I would also like to try and make some individual rye flour rolls, but that will be a project for the future. I'll leave the experiments up to you for now. So what do you think of my individual sandwich rolls? Have you ever tried something like this before? Do let me know down in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this one, click over here, subscribe to the channel, click right here. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.